Good morning, and wow, that's loud. Can we, okay, let's try that. It's still kind of loud, a little bit of a feedback. Okay, so good morning and welcome to Aviation and Transportation Subcommittee. I'll sit back and maybe, oh, is it my phone? Okay, let's try it now. It's still a little bit of a feedback, but okay, it's a better. Thank you. Welcome to the Aviation and Transportation Subcommittee. And we have a pretty full agenda today, and we're still having, it's because Nick was here. Put your phone down.
I think we're gonna have to restart the system.
Turn it off? Okay.
And the revenue will go towards transit operations, which is great for them. And just this large mix of uses is really a highlight to this project. You see the timelines of construction and are a little longer. This is a very complex, large project. It's a single phase, so they'll start the construction all at one time, but at different times, as things finish, different things will open. So it'll progress from that point as they start construction. Some of the estimated benefits: the brand new 9,000 square feet transit center. Transit department is very excited about that. The increased ridership from the residents, the students, the office workers, hotel guests, and really people coming in will be a good destination point for them. And then the high-rise transit-oriented development right along our light rail lines, our busiest transit site in the city. The additional revenue for transit operations, stable revenue for the next 99 years that will help boost operations. And then the $231 million capital investment with no city assistance being requested. So, and then of course in economic development, we all love the jobs that will be coming. So had to throw that in.
And if you wouldn't mind.
Yes.
Going back to the previous slide, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, an appraisal was done on this property, and the offer on the property from the applicant does meet fair market value and does see increases on an annual basis to be able to provide a constant revenue stream, as Nate mentioned, back to the transit department for the 99 years. But it does meet what was called for in the RFP based on the appraised value of the property.
And since October, when the electric grid was selected by the RFP panel, we've been busy with the developer and public transit, going around to community meetings, met with 7 adjacent property owners. There's been a lot of support and excitement about the project. And as Chris mentioned, in December, we went to the Citizens Transportation Commission. And last week, we actually met with the Federal Transit Administration and got good feedback. We have a good plan. So if approved today and we move forward, and if approved next week, we would then work to get all our agreements in final form and then talk to the FTA again and submit everything and wait for their approval. And they've given us, they were very pleased with the project. I think the meeting went very well last week. And we're here today seeking authorization to enter into agreements with Electric Red Ventures LLC to redevelop the Central Station site.
And Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we're at the end of our presentation, and you'll see there wasn't a slide in there with any city requested assistance programs. This applicant has not requested any assistance programs from the city, and will be building all the public infrastructure, the relocation of transit, and the project on its own.
Thank you very much. We do have one speaker card. It was if needed. Nick Wood, do you want to just smile?
Madam
Okay.
Chair, I have nothing to add.
Okay. So do we have any questions? Okay.
Thank you. Can you go back to slide 6?
Yes. Yes.
Right there. On E, retail, restaurant, grocery, is it one of these that may be coming or all 3?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza, yes, they are looking at trying to add amenities that would be all of the above. So they're working to have kind of a small grocery concept,
Okay.
Restaurants, of course, and also retail.
Okay, so we need some retail.
Madam
downtown.
Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza, absolutely. In fact, we've already received pretty strong interest on this site from another grocery
Okay.
that is interested in being in downtown even before the first one opens, as well as a number of other restaurants. And I know something that is near and dear to importance to you is bringing that much-needed retail
Yes.
into downtown.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have is, I know because this is a transportation site, it's on the agenda, aviation transportation agenda today, but would it be possible to take it to downtown subcommittee for information and discussion?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, absolutely. We will get that on your next agenda, which I believe is April 3rd. We can get that submitted for today.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Any questions? Okay, so can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve. I think it's very exciting. I know you have worked very hard on this and come up with an excellent project, so congratulations.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And thank you, and thanks for not asking for any assistance. Yeah, you are, I know.
That's out of character, I know.
Yeah, bring more of that. Okay, next item is 15, and it's changes to the Phoenix speed limits in Phoenix. Brianna, welcome.
Get to my right spot here. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We're here to talk to you, first item today, talk about changes to the Phoenix speed limits. And it's something that we're working on transitioning from a current process that we have and working through how we change our speed limits around our city streets to a new process that is a little bit more interactive and proactive than in the past. So I'm going to let our Assistant Director, Marina Velez, take us through the PowerPoint presentation.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'm excited to talk to you today about our changes to the Phoenix speed limits. And so the speed limit orders is established under Arizona Revised States Section 28-703, which allows the local jurisdiction to modify speed limits and set forth a reasonable and safe maximum speed limit for our roadways. So this does require an engineering study and a traffic investigation to be completed. And per Phoenix City Code and the Charter, it does require that City Council adopt the speed limit changes based on an amendment to the speed limit ordinance. So as we look at the engineering study that's involved as part of this, there's some evaluation criteria that goes in to consider what the appropriate speed limit should be. And so we take a look at the roadway classification. So is it an arterial? Is it a collector? Typical speed limits for our collector streets range from 25 miles per hour to about 35 miles per hour. And on our arterial streets, typically they range from 35 miles per hour to approximately 45 miles per hour. We also conduct a speed study, and so this is typically a 1-hour radar study that's done during non-peak hours. We make sure we capture a minimum of 100 vehicles during this speed study, and that helps us determine what the average speed is, as well as the 85th percentile speed. So we also take a look at what the adjacent speed limits are around there. And so as you're driving down a roadway, we typically don't want to go from one speed limit to another where there is an increase or decrease larger than 10 miles per hour. We also will consider what the land use is. And so when we're looking at a particular roadway, what is the land use around it? And so is it commercial next to the roadway? Is it residential? Or is there a school nearby? And so the other consideration is the look and feel of the roadway. And so this is really how the roadway operates. And so this is where we will consider collision history, as well as take a look at pedestrian activity and bicycle activity, and really look at the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. So typically, our requests come from 3 sources, and typically that would be residents will request a speed limit evaluation, in addition to police department also provides requests. And then we have our safety review that is conducted by our department, where based on collision data, we think we need to evaluate what the speed limit is. And so as we take a look at what our current process is, we receive a request and we evaluate the potential speed limit changes, which is the engineering study. We would then implement those changes in the field. So we would physically go out there and modify the speed limit based on that study, followed by the city council adoption of changes. And so what we're recommending now as our new process is we would still accept those requests typically from those 3 sources. We would do the evaluation, which is the engineering study, but we would request city council approval in advance from all of you before we implemented those changes. And so then we would go out and implement those changes. And so typically when we implement those changes in the field, we will typically put like some orange flags on the speed limit sign advising motorists that the speed limit has changed. Or we can do a portable variable message sign that lets the drivers know that the speed limit has changed in a particular area. So because of the new process and us seeking approval before implementation, we will be coming to you twice per year rather than annually on our speed limit changes. So changes under our current process. And so the last speed limit ordinance revision was in September of 2018. And since then, we've had a couple new construction related changes. And so these are 2 collectors that were built as part of a residential development, Sky Crossing Way from Deer Valley Road to 33rd Street, as well as 32nd Street, Deer Valley Road to Sky Crossing Way. And so it's currently posted at 30 miles per hour. And so typically on any new roadways, during the design phase, the engineer would determine what the appropriate speed limit is. It would get reviewed and approved by our department, and it would get implemented. And so this is something that kind of caught in between, and that is now open to traffic, and we need to capture in the new ordinance. In addition, we have 2 record-keeping changes. And so these are 2 areas where the speed limit was reduced. And so we implemented what a study said, but we never brought it through to you guys through a previous ordinance. And so we need the speed limit that's in the field to match up with our current ordinance. And so that would be Southern Avenue, 39th Avenue to 31st Avenue, that has been reduced from 45 miles per hour to 40 miles per hour, as well as 51st Avenue from Baseline Road to Broadway Road, that had been reduced from 50 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour. So as we talk about the new roadways, we will do our very best to work with both our development partners as well as our guys building our new streets to make sure that we are getting those into a cycle prior to it opening for traffic, so we can get those speed limits included in any of the ordinances. So under the new process, we do have 2 proposed changes that we're recommending based on an engineering and traffic study. We have Central Avenue, Orange Drive to Northern Avenue, which is a little less than 3 miles. And so this was a resident request. And so we are proposing, based on the traffic study, that it be reduced from 40 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour. As well as Pinnacle Peak Road from Cave Creek Road to Tatum Boulevard. And this was not only a resident request, but a police department request. And so based on the engineering study, we are recommending that we reduce the speed from 50 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour on this stretch of road. And this is a little over 3 miles. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kenny for the recommendation.
Thank you, Brianna. So we're here today to request subcommittee approval to City Council of the adoption of our recommended speed limit changes to the speed limit ordinance.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
For an example, use Bell Road. When it goes into the other cities, are the speed limits comparable? I mean, are the same, or how do you adjust for that?
Any other questions? Well, thank you for this. As we know, speeding is a big issue, and I think this is a good process. I appreciate the change. Can I have a motion? All in favor? Aye. It passes. Thank you. So next on our agenda, we're actually collapsing items 16, 17, 18 together, and this be exciting because it's actually talking about safety improvements throughout the city, and I know neighborhoods have been very involved in this, and I think some of them are here today to talk about what's happening in their neighborhoods. So with that, turn it over to you, Keeney.
So even though, maybe not, stay back.
I'm going to try the speaker as well. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Aviation and Transportation Subcommittee. So I will be presenting on 3 different projects this morning: the 20th Street project, the 56th Street project, and the 3rd Street project. All projects that have been through a pre-design effort, essentially taking us to 15% design. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the presentation. So we're going to start off with our first project, the 20th Street, Grand Canal Avenue to Glendale Avenue. So this is a 3.7-mile segment project that was funded through a MAG Design Assistance Grant, which really allowed us to leverage our city dollars with grant monies to do this pre-design effort. This corridor was identified in our Bicycle Master Plan, and it actually ranked number 4 on that list. So we're really excited about this particular project. So some of the project goals that we were looking at is creating a safe, low-stress, low-volume bike and pedestrian corridor with this project. We're also looking to integrate complete street elements as well, and then looking for more efficient use of roadway, and I'll explain that better later in my presentation. In addition, we're looking to keep existing travel lanes with this project, and we want to look to create seamless connections. And the best way I can describe that is the visual that you see to the right. So the 20th Street corridor is really a north-south corridor that, when planned and laid out as shown, would connect to an Oak Street project, which is another bike and ped project that is in final design right now. In the future, it could also connect to a Coulter Street alignment, which is in the pre-design effort through a MAG Design Assistance Grant as well. Leading to our 3rd Street project, which is in final design as well, connecting to Roosevelt and then to the downtown core. So again, a systematic approach to create and put bicyclists where they need to go and where they want to go. So then our 20th Street project was really a well-received, had really good public involvement process. I think that visual kind of speaks loudly in volumes. So this community meeting had over 2 public meetings with over 100 residents in participation. So what we heard from the community is they absolutely did not want to lose any lane reductions in this project. They said that if we were going to narrow those lanes up, that they wanted to make sure that the larger vehicles could still drive down them. They didn't want us to impact vehicle access changes or negatively impact it, particularly with the Bethany Home Road connection. They wanted us to look at improving pedestrian crossings along their corridor, They wanted us to look to preserve on-street parking wherever possible. And so then, through the pre-design efforts, these were some of the ideas that rose to the top and that the community really wanted us to incorporate. So some of the proposed improvements is we're looking to reduce speeds along that entire corridor. We're looking to add buffered bike lanes as a part of this project as well. And looking to narrow traffic lanes, again, that usually slows down traffic with that perception of narrower roadways. We were also going to look to rebuild ramps and driveways that meet ADA standards, and looking to improve intersection improvements as well. One of the things that came out of this project is we were going to approach it in 2 phases. So phase 1 would take us from the Grand Canal up to Missouri Avenue in the short term, and the long-term phase would be Missouri to Glendale. And the reason for that is there were still some issues that needed to be vetted out in the northern part of the area, so the group as a whole felt this was the best approach in terms of attacking the project. So this visual that you see is really good in terms of what is out there today. And this is along the 20th Street corridor for our residential portion, which is from Grand Canal to Highland. Essentially, this is a north-south collector with 2-lane travels, 1 in each direction, plus bike lanes. This roadway is about 38 feet wide, so there's definitely some opportunity to do things out there. And so with that, our pre-design concept and our plan now is, this is the proposal. We're going to keep those 2 lanes of traffic, 1 in each direction, and then we're going to separate the bike lanes with a 3-foot striped area with raised pavement markers, essentially separating the 10-foot lane with the bikers as well. In addition, we're looking to add 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street and putting in streetlights wherever they're missing. So this is the commercial segment of 20th Street, which essentially runs from Highland to Camelback Road. And so this is the existing roadway that you see today, a little bit wider than what's in the residential section. We're looking at about 82-foot wide roadway. And again, we're looking to have, there's 2 lanes of travel in both directions along this segment. So the proposal that came out of the pre-design effort is that we're absolutely going to maintain those 2 lanes of travel in both directions by having 11-foot travel lanes. We're also going to add 10-foot turning lanes in each direction. And for this particular corridor, we're looking to add protected bike lanes, which would be a 4-foot landscape median that would separate the travel lanes with the 5-foot bike lane. And one thing to keep in mind is this is our commercial segment of the project. And one of the things that we heard loud and clear, and the business owners on both sides of the street said they were amenable to that as long as we can consolidate and keep access to their properties. And that's something that the pre-design effort said, we think we can do that. So definitely well received. In addition, we're looking to add a 10-foot sidewalk on the west side of the street and 5-foot sidewalk on the east side of the street.
Is this where Town and Country is? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Get myself back.
Town and Country and Colonnade on the other side.
Okay.
Those are very, very
Yes.
busy commercial centers.
Absolutely,
So it's good that
absolutely.
you got the buy-in.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely. So then the staff recommends guidance from the Aviation and Transportation Subcommittee in terms of what are the next steps for this phase 1 of the project. Are there any questions?
So if you have any questions at all before we move on to the next one? Yes, Council.
Sure. 1, 2, 3. This one? 6. Okay, uh-huh. 10-foot is reasonable. We can go down as low as 9.5. It really just depends.
Typically, we're looking anywhere from 10 to 12 feet is what we have as a vehicle lane. And I know one of the concerns there was about the larger vehicles. But if you'll see, one thing that we didn't do is when we're looking at these buffered bike lanes, it allows vehicles to use more than just the striped width of the street, the striped 10 feet. So if you did have a larger vehicle, you'd have the buffer to keep. Whereas if you look at the existing one right now, for example, if that were a 10-foot lane in that location, you just have a 6-inch stripe there protecting bicycles. So if a vehicle was to move over, they would go right into a bicycle. Here you've got a little bit of a buffer for those larger vehicles if that was needed.
Any other questions?
So do you want us to comment on each of them individually, or should we?
It's a pleasure of you, Madam Chair. If you'd like to talk about each one, we just wanted to have an opportunity. If there's particular concerns or questions about one of the projects, we'd wanted to have an opportunity to be able to not have to wait till the end.
Why don't we go through the other two, because I know we have some speakers. I got a feeling they're here for the next item, 56th Street.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'll jump right into our next project, which is our 56 project. So our 56 project runs from Thomas Road to Camelback Road. It is a 1.5-mile segment project. This project, similar to 20th Street, was also funded through a MAG Design Assistance Grant, allowing us to leverage city dollars. This project, the project goals are to create a bicycle and pedestrian, to be sensitive to bicycle and pedestrian safety, to look to see if there's any area of opportunity for ADA improvements, to fill corridor gaps, and what I mean by that is either through sidewalks and or missing street lights, to integrate the complete streets concepts as well along this corridor. And so this project was very much a public resident-driven project. They approached the city and really had large interest in having us work with them, so this was a great opportunity. So one of the community input we had for this project, we had over 3 community meetings and over 300 residents involved with this project. So it was a very, very successful project. What we heard from the community is they wanted to identify a sense of place in their community. They wanted to see grade-separated bike lanes as well. They wanted us to look at traffic calming. There was an existing traffic circle on Exeter that they thought may have some opportunities for improvement. Also, they wanted us to consider shade trees along the corridor, upgrade and add new sidewalks wherever possible. This was interesting. What we heard at this meeting is that drainage was a big concern for this area, which is something that we definitely added to our project scope. And then they wanted us to look at hawk signals, potentially at a good location, and high visibility crosswalks as well. So that's the input we heard. Now the pre-design effort, after months of working with our designer and also listening to the community, this was the consolidated scope that was reached, and that is the recommendation to maintain 2 lanes of travel, 11 feet in both directions, to add 6-foot bike lanes on both sides, to add a 10-foot multi-use path. Now, what was interesting about this community is they really felt that they wanted to be sensitive to the family-friendly nature of their community as well. So adding this off-system multi-use trail could facilitate that, really having the new bicycles folks on that corridor. And then we're also going to be fully completing sidewalks along that corridor. We're looking to add a 24-inch storm drain, and that was directly received from the public involvement process. We're going to look to add shade trees and improve the existing roundabout at Exeter, which was the request, and also look at mid-block crossings near schools. So then again, staff is recommending a guidance from this subcommittee on this project.
Madam Chair, I just had one quick thing I wanted to point out. It was something that was clear in the report, but maybe not so much in the presentation, which one of the key components of this stretch here is a number of schools that are along this corridor. So it was what we heard clearly from the community is they wanted a corridor that was bike and ped friendly, so people could feel safe taking their kids or having their kids go to school along 56th Street, but also to be able to slow down some of the traffic of folks who may not bike or walk to school, who are dropping off kids, to be able to make sure that we had traffic slowing in that area.
Please. Okay. You showed green on the bike path. Is that going to be a standard throughout the city? Because somewhere they're green and somewhere they're not, and people say, what's the green mean?
I guess I'm the one to answer that question. Madam Chair, Councilwoman Williams, what my kind of direction, what I've been working with staff on is that when we put in bike lanes, that when we have the standard bicycle marking, which is the bicyclist that you see in the bike lanes, is to highlight that with green paint just around there. The continuous green lanes is not something we're going to have as a standard. The only time we'll use continuous green is coming up to a intersection or away from intersection where we might have conflict points of a through travel lane where you have a right turn lane, so they've got to cross from a through travel lane to a right turn lane and they have to cross over the bike lane. It's to make sure that the vehicles are aware that there's bicycles in there. But the continuous green bicycle lane is not something we're looking at making a standard. It is an option out there for particular locations, but I would like to be more focused on making sure that we provide a reminder to vehicle traffic that it is a bike lane. It's not just a white paint with asphalt on the other side. That the green paint will help identify and hopefully make safer those bicycle lanes.
I'm not objecting to them. I'm just saying we need to teach people what they are. Get the word out that that's what it means and to be more careful. And then my second question, on the mid-block crossing near the schools, will that be Hawks?
Right now, it is planned to be a Hawk.
Thank you.
And to add onto what Kenny's saying, the green paint, usually when we discuss with the community, we like to use green paint in areas of cycling where there's crossings or coming up to an intersection. But usually we have the stencils that mark the bike lane, but we have green paint when we have merging of different modes. And in addition, this project was, and our partners for the 56 Street Saves Community Group. And one of the things that we've implemented here in partnership with them was a two-tier bicycle approach. As Leticia talked about, there are existing 6-foot bike lanes on the street right now. But we wanted to, as Leticia said, introduce family and smaller bicyclists in the adjoining multi-use path. So that was kind of our approach.
Thank you. We actually have two speakers on this item. So Crystal DeVellis, am I pronouncing that correctly? I'm sorry if I... All right. Please come up to the microphone. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Can you hear me okay? Yes. My name's Crystal DeVellis. I live at 4351 East Whitten Avenue. I am the co-chair of the Arcadia Osborne Neighborhood Association's Crime and Safety Committee, and I'm also a member of the 56th Street Saves and Connects Committee. We got together, Arcadia Osborne and Arcadia Camelback, got together in about 2016 and started trying to figure out how we could make 56th Street a more user-friendly stretch of road, considering there is a preschool just north of Indian School, a middle school just south of Indian School, and a charter school just north of Thomas. In some of those areas, there's not even a sidewalk. The part north of Indian School has grown from its original charter in the 1920s with very little change. It also is a very popular bike route from Camelback down to Papago Park. We weren't able to include the small stretch south of Thomas, but it is a highly used bike route to connect those two resources in the city. Speed has been an issue because the area from Indian School to Thomas is wide open, looks like a landing strip. People drive on it like it's a landing strip. We really would like to change the look and feel of it to make it more user-friendly. We have worked very diligently and literally gone door to door with the people who live on 56th Street, gotten extremely positive buy-in for this project. So we hope you will consider that taking this forward and making improvements that will make this street safer and more user-friendly as it is now, and to also take into consideration the approximately 300 new homes that will be going in at the Phoenician, who will also be using this road.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
We have one other speaker, Graham Schwab. We might have to give him a microphone. You may not be able to, unless you can, there you go. Welcome, Graham.
Good morning, City Council members. My name is Graham Schaub, and I live at 3824 North 54th Court, about 2 streets away from 56th Street. 56th Street takes me to school, the park, violin lessons, the youth symphony, and Arcadia Falls. I feel it's important to improve 56th Street because it will be safer for me and my friends, and my parents will be more willing to walk and bike with me to the parks. For other people, it will decrease accidents, improve flooding problems, and parents will be more likely to let their kids walk or bike to school. Please approve this request to make 56th Street a complete street. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You did a great job. We
Thank you.
appreciate you being here. Okay, why don't we go to our next item, and then we can talk about all three after. Thank you.
That what came out of the study, which was Lincoln to Indian School Road. What came out of the study is that we first focus in this corridor because there are a lot of areas of improvement for various mobility and ADA components, and that can be visible with all the different stakeholders that we see on this exhibit. So we have the Phoenix Convention Center included along this corridor, as well as a Talking Stick Resort. We also have the Warehouse District, and we also have a railroad line that crosses all of that. Not to mention two pretty busy light rail stations, one at Jefferson and one at Washington. So the current conditions of 3rd Street along this corridor, it's a one-way collector with 3 southbound lanes and on-street parking as well. So based on several meetings that we held with several partners and stakeholders, what we heard loud and clear was that the stakeholders wanted to maintain at least 2 lanes of southbound capacity along this corridor. They were also looking for us to improve ADA drop-off. And then they wanted us to keep in mind the egress pattern because of the sunburst and all the venues that we have, that the final configuration absolutely needed to work with sunburst as well. And then we also wanted to look at adding bike facilities along this corridor. One thing I do want to keep in mind, or I failed to mention, was that this 3rd Street is actually the #1 ranked corridor in our bicycle master plan. So it's very important to that plan as well. So out of the pre-design efforts, these are the proposals, the proposed improvements that we hope to incorporate in this project. Well, we're looking to add pedestrian improvements along the corridor, converting the one-way to a 2-way roadway, adding protected bicycle facility, which would be the first of its kind in Phoenix once this project comes to fruition. Looking to make the railroad a railroad quiet zone, and I'll add a little clarification on for those that don't know what a railroad cross zone. So in order to go from a typical railroad crossing to a quiet zone, there is an elaborate design with flashers, and the gates are designed with a lot of safety in mind. It's pretty costly, which would allow the train conductor not to have to blow the horn when it's crossing. So that's what we mean when we say railroad quiet zone. Also ensuring that we can maintain some on-street parking along the corridor, and then looking to add pickup and drop off because of the different venues in the area, making sure we can accommodate that as well. So this project will be approached in 2 phases, and one of the driving forces is the railroad project. Because there is that design as well as coordination with Union Pacific, we're going to approach this in 2 phases. From Lincoln Street to the railroad crossing would be phase 1, essentially going to 2 southbound lanes and 1 northbound lane on the far right, adding 8.5 lane parking on the west side of the street, and then adding this bicycle track on the west side. And the reason for that is there's a lot of parking garages for the venues on, so it made more sense to put it on the west side. And again, we're excited about what the final design of that turns out to be. As well as adding 6-foot sidewalks on the west side and a 4-foot sidewalk on the east side of the street. Phase 2 would then go in once we've done the coordination and able to widen that railroad crossing up. We would go from the railroad to Washington Street, and then it would be the full configuration as you see here. So at this time, we request the same guidance from this subcommittee.
We have a question?
Thank you. Can you tell me the reasoning between the 10, 11, and 12 foot lanes? Why the difference? Why not make them all the same?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza. The reasoning for the 12, 11, and 10 feet is the 10-foot lane is most appropriate when it's next to the 8.5-foot parking lane, and the other 2 lanes initially would be used for outflow from the parking garage, and then the directions would change. As discussed in the presentation, the first phase goes up to the Union Pacific Railroad, and that coincides with the stipulation from the ballpark apartments, which calls for 1 travel lane going northbound to access that future development. So we would continue that once we've gotten through the railroad process and moving that forward. Does that answer your question?
The 12-foot lane, the reason why it's a 12-foot lane there is because it's right against the curb and gutter, so that 12-foot concludes from the face of gutter, or face of the curb, to the lane stripes. So that's why you need a little bit more extra 12-foot there, because you don't want people driving in the gutter pan, is what we call it, the 18 kind of inch gap between the face of curb to actually have the asphalt. Madam Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza, that's something we can definitely include in looking at evaluating not just how this roadway would function in the lane widths, but also how it would tie in with all the other lane widths that we have in downtown as well, where we have that potential concerns. But I hear what you're saying as far as the concern about making sure you feel like you have space, that you feel like you're safe being able to pass in these lanes.
And just another question. So this would be a dramatic change going both north and south. So what do you do to let people know about that? How do you prepare for that?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, that's something that obviously, as we touched on, we're at 15% or a little around 15% design. As we go through final design, there'd be a lot more public interaction, and even as we move through, if we were to move this project forward to construction, it's something that we would be working in an education and talking with community groups and folks who use downtown and come downtown for events, so that it's not something that they're unprepared for. But definitely the education piece needs to accompany when we're doing any engineering changes and designs.
I did have a question. Have you spoken to the sons and the police down here for this? When the games are over and they all want to leave town at the same time, and that's what worries me is you're changing it and narrowing it, and I just want to make sure everybody's on board.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Williams, we had numerous partnering meetings with the sports complex, which included the Suns and the Diamondbacks, as well as police and the parking led by Mr. Broder. And then we also met with the warehouse committee, as well as convention center and other appropriate departments. We incorporated their feedback, and they were very much in favor of this phased process. There are still some things probably to iron out in the final design, all the safety features, et cetera, but they were on board with the process that we've gone through thus far and the concept that is presented today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentations. I do want to say thank you to the residents around 56th Street. We certainly got I got a lot of emails anyway. You certainly were involved in the process, and just your activism speaks volumes, and I think we really should move that project for sure ahead. But I think all the projects are worthy of trying to advance into the CIP. But thanks, and thank you, Graham. That was a great presentation. Any other comments? Okay, let's move it forward then. Thank you. And our last item is the Complete Streets update, and I think some of the projects that we saw here are good examples of putting Complete Streets into principle and into action. So I asked for an update on where we're at.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm joined here by Chris Kowalski, a Special Projects Administrator in our Program and Project Delivery Division, who's been very much involved in Complete Streets in the process that we've been undertaking for a number of years now. I would mention it is for information and discussion, but we wanted to just, before I turn it over to Chris, just talk about that we did, it's a lot of work by the council to get us where we're at today with adoption of the Complete Street ordinances and also the policy that we've had adopted, and most recently the guidelines that were put in place. And this is kind of a follow-up to what action the council did take on the guidelines and how we're taking that and working with developers and ourselves, as you see with these three projects we talked about earlier, how we're trying to do more than just having writing on paper and guidelines, and how it actually comes into fruition and action. So I'll turn it over to Chris to take you through the presentation.
Okay. I talk a lot with my hands. This is going to be tough. Madam Chair, subcommittee members, thank you so much. As Kenny mentioned, the previous presentation really touched on a lot of the transportation projects that we're doing and how we're trying to incorporate Complete Streets really into a lot of the projects we're doing. One of the things that came up from last summer's coordination in taking those guidelines through for council approval was a development checklist, was a Complete Streets design checklist, not only for City of Phoenix projects, but what we can do for the developers to ensure that Complete Streets elements are being implemented to the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance with projects. And so we worked with Street Transportation Department ourselves, with Planning and Development Department. We worked with our partners at Valley Partnership, Home Builders Association, NAOP, throughout these last few months to come up with a checklist that everyone was agreeable with. And so this will now, beginning on April 1st, next Monday, this checklist will then be required with every preliminary site plan that gets submitted into the City of Phoenix. The one other option that we really like about this is it gives the development community an opportunity to also do design elements or construction elements that aren't defined, but that actually further Complete Streets design. And so the thought process behind that is working with our partners there, tracking these submittals, and then identifying maybe there are elements that we can go ahead and maybe make future text amendments on so that the ease of those implementations could occur. So that'll be one of the side benefits as we move forward with this checklist. Another thing that we're working on currently right now is how do we implement health and wellness into our performance measures for Complete Streets. One of the things that came out of the Complete Streets working group was the health and wellness aspects. We have kind of the hard improvements, right? Pedestrian improvements, ADA ramps, number of sidewalks, LED streetlight conversions. But how do we really focus on making sure that we're getting that health and wellness perspective in a project. And so what we've done is we've engaged with Envitalist Health. We've also had conversations with a local epidemiologist in terms of looking at how we can associate and develop attributes for health and wellness. And so we'll continue to work with them over the next couple months. Some of the thoughts are through maybe potential education, outreach, maybe it's public surveys. And really what the Complete Streets Advisory Board, what they were looking for was ways of how a project affects the decision making. Did it make them decide to do something differently? Did the project encourage them to maybe take a different mode? Did it make them have a sense of better safety or security in a corridor? And so those are the things we're going to try to continue to work with the health community to identify what the best measures are so that we can put that in future annual reports and then measure the effectiveness of those. Another area that we're looking to do, or we're currently under design to do, is our design manual update. Right now, the last time the design manual was updated was in 2009. We know since that time there's been a lot of policies and procedures, complete streets have been adopted and so forth, so we want to make sure we update that manual. And really what it is, it's a how-to guide for not only our engineers but also our city project managers to determine how do you implement complete streets elements. And so examples of that would be, we know we want a bike lane, what's the width of that bike lane? We know we want it protected, what is the standard protection that we should utilize and how does that get installed? There's complete streets elements, benches, seating, shade. Where does that need to be placed? How should that be constructed? And so that these manual actually give the guidance in how that actually gets shown on a plan sheet and then gets constructed out in the field. One of the other things that we're looking to do is coordinate that with the Key Corridor Master Plan study that's going on. With that study, we're looking at identifying all the different priorities or corridors throughout the city. We know we have differing land uses, differing contexts, depending on where it aligns. We know it's either suburban or it's urban. It could be transit focused. It could be more oriented towards freight. And so one of the things that came out of those discussions was, as you see here, an example, is making sure that we're looking and providing cross-sections that meet the corridor specifically, so that the development community as well as our city projects can have an understanding of what that needs to look like in terms of the land use or the context that it needs to be placed into. And so we'll go ahead and work with our consultant, continue with that manual to have multiple cross-sections that kind of touch on all those different elements based upon the type of corridor that it's identified as. So with that, I know it was kind of short, but that was the presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
I do, thank you. I have a couple questions.
Can you do studies on the effects of bike lanes and traffic patterns?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza, that's a great question, and it's a question we actually, when we're working with our Citizens Transportation Commission, that's a question that's been posed, and how do you evaluate the effectiveness of what we're doing? As you may remember, Proposition 104 and Transportation 2050, we're supposed to put in 1,080 new bicycle lane miles. Well, how are you going to judge whether the effectiveness of putting that out there? And so one of the things we've been working with our Citizens Transportation Commission on is setting up measurement points. So we've been measuring the number of bicyclists and pedestrians that are using different areas of the city. So we have monitoring stations set up that we're going out and doing accounts on these, because the ultimate goal is to figure out, are more people using or choosing to use bicycles or walking to get to the destinations. But a lot of the foundation, kind of the background information related to that, hasn't been measured in the past. So we can only kind of go from today and measure where we're at today with a baseline and be able to, as we implement these bicycle lanes and these projects, what's the change in behavior is kind of what Chris was talking about. How did it help affect deciding whether they're going to bike or walk or get in a vehicle or transit? What was their decision-making process? We want to be able to have a positive effect by what we're doing in the investments.
What about the effect on traffic congestion and reducing lanes?
Well, I will tell you, the reducing lanes conversation is something we don't take lightly. It's something we definitely work with the council on and the public. And so when we're doing the reduction of lanes, we're looking at traffic counts. We're looking at what the traffic counts are today, what we expect those to be going forward in the future. If we're looking at reduction of lanes, we want to make sure that we have the capacity, remaining capacity, if we're going to reduce travel lanes, to be able to handle traffic patterns, not just today, but into the future. But as far as measuring congestion, those things, that's something that we work with our partners in American Association of Governments to look at travel patterns, and congestion time, those kind of things get measured, and they get measured regularly. And so that's something we do monitor as we're going through, not just on a project-by-project basis, but also for our system. I would think, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza, I think we don't have anything saying that for definitively this is what it is, but if I'm looking at it from a standpoint of the safety of pedestrians, because pedestrians are going to be typically on our sidewalks. Anytime you're providing additional space away from vehicles that are going essentially 40 or 50 miles an hour faster than people are walking, you're going to have a chance to be able to make a safer environment for people to walk. Now, how that buffer happens, whether it's with bicycle lanes or parking, there's different ways to be able to do that. But that is something that I know for years we've been working with, or at least especially with our new streets, on detaching sidewalks. So detaching them, not having them attached to the curb, so we have a landscape strip or some kind of buffer between the curb and the actual sidewalk. So that provides additional distance between the pedestrian and any vehicle conflicts out there, regardless whether there's bike lanes or not. Thank you for those comments. I mean, that's something we've heard loud and clear from the council, and actually members of the public as well. And our goal is not to put necessarily bicycle lanes everywhere. We want to put them so we can have a connected network. Just like our streets aren't a connected network, our transit system isn't a connected network. We want our bicycles the same way. And I harken back to one of the presentations we had earlier, where we were talking about 20th Street and looking how it connected in with these different east, west, and north-south projects. None of those roadways were Indian School or Camelback or 24th Street or 16th Street. Those weren't our major streets. Those were our what we call our collector streets that allow you to put bicycles in an area where they're safer.
I think one of the things I learned about complete streets is it doesn't mean every street's going to have a bike lane. Not every street's going to be pedestrian oriented. I had an opportunity to go up to Seattle last summer, and there are roads that are just designated for freights because they have so much truck traffic because of all the ports. So complete streets is really about looking at all the streets and seeing what the need is on that particular street. So I think that is a good principle to keep in mind, and I think that'll help with the bike lanes as well. But thank you so much for your presentation. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. So we have a call to the public, and I still have no cards. So future agenda items, are there any items you want to add to our list?
Any updates on pavement streets that we finished?
Okay, since we've kicked off our accelerated pavement management program, we want to get an update on that, so we'll add that. So thank you very much, because I know you've been having all the neighborhood meetings. I understand you've had over 50 already, so, okay, great. Anything else?
Well, I know there's also been improvements, so I want to make sure that
Okay,
we let
including
the public knows about those improvements that
Okay.
have already been made.
Perfect, okay. Yes, let's highlight what we've done. With that, I don't think we have anything else. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.